Hi, welcome to the Turner Dodge House. We are beginning our Media City program for the month, and our special guest is Nathalie Winans, who will be talking about one of her ancestors, Ulysses Ward. We're interested in him too because he lived at the same time as James and Marion Turner. He came from New York, as they did, and built a lovely house here eventually after they got settled in. And she's found out a lot about her family and about Lansing history by doing research on her family, and we hope you'll enjoy the program today. And next month, we'll have Craig Whitford, who's going to talk about the Lansing Courthouse. And that will be interesting from the Turner Dodge perspective as well, because Frank Dodge had a lot to do with the building of the courthouse in the 1900s. It'll be their 100th anniversary program. And then in December, we'll be getting ready for our holiday open house, which starts on December 4th and goes through those first 3 weekends through the 19th. And Michael Eschelbach is going to come, and he's going to talk about some of the holiday ornaments that he collects, especially ones called Kugels, which come from Germany. It should be a fun program, and so I invite you to come down sometime and watch our program here live at Turner Dodge. It's held each first Thursday of the month at noon, and you can bring a sandwich and we'll supply the coffee or tea. So join us then, or join us this month while we show the program with Nathalie Winans. And Nathalie Winans, I believe, has a few of her family here as well. So you may hear some sort of family-oriented questions along with our discussion. I'd like you to say something about that wonderful outfit of yours.
Okay, this is an 1883 bustle gown, and I designed it using as many primary sources as I could, and also many vintage materials and fabrics and patterns and that sort of thing. And I had it commissioned by someone who specializes in these outfits. And the reason why I wore this costume today is because this is the sort of thing that was in fashion when my great-grandmother came to Lansing in 1883.
It's wonderful. Just wonderful. Just turn around a little bit, would you, please? So beautiful. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. I'm here today to talk about Ulysses Doubleday Ward, a Lansing pioneer and my great-great-uncle. Ulysses started his life in New York State, and I have the benefit of a great-grandfather who was very interested in history and in recording history, and he left us with several typed accounts of our family history. And what Ernest Herschel Ward has to say about his uncle is this. The David Ward family was born and raised near Weedsport, Cayuga County, New York, at an inland settlement called Cold Spring Pump. There were about 14 or 15 children, several of whom died in infancy. This photo was taken about 1882 when the whole family came to a reunion at the Lansing home of U.D. Ward. And everybody called Ulysses Ward U.D. This is Ulysses Doubleday Ward. The people in the photo are Ulysses Ward and his brothers and sister and his mother and daughter. So here we have Stephen Van Rensselaer Ward, Richmond Leffingwell Ward, Herschel Clinton Ward, this is my great-great-grandfather, Mandeville Franklin Ward, Lida Ward Brandel, this is Ulysses' daughter. The baby is Fanny Richardson. I know nothing about Fanny Richardson. This is Diana Ward Halstead, also Ulysses' sister. This is Sarah Blackmar Ward, Ulysses Ward's mother. And she was in her 70s when this photo was taken, and she lived until 1889. And she died in her 80s, so that's a very nice long life for the 19th century. This is Ulysses Ward, and this is his brother, Jeru Wesley Ward. Okay. Now, I also have an account of Ulysses Ward's life written in a book called The Portrait and Biographical Album of Ingham and Livingston Counties, Michigan. This book was published in 1891, and I found this book by searching Yahoo for information on Ulysses W. Ward. So this account begins in typical Victorian fashion. Ulysses D. Ward. It is of thrilling interest to one whose heart is loyal to our country's honor to hear an old soldier recount the scenes of conflicts, the wearisome marches, and the exciting episodes of the Civil War. And it is also an education, for we learn of such a one not only history and geography, but also the higher lessons of patriotism, endurance, self-denial, and devotion to duty. The years are passing rapidly, and before many decades have passed over our heads, the active participants in those stirring scenes will have gone to their long home, and it behooves us to gain more from them what we can while they are with us. Among those who can thus interest and instruct is the gentleman whose name appears at the head of this paragraph and who is still one of the active businessmen of Lansing. He was still alive when this account was written in 1891. This gentleman was born in the township of Cato, Cayuga County, New York, May 28, 1828, his parents being David and Sarah Blackmar Ward. The grandfather, Joseph Blackmar, took up 600 acres of land on a soldier's claim in an adjoining township. David Ward grew to maturity and spent his days in his native home, where he was not only a farm owner, but also a school teacher and a school inspector. It is half a century since, at the age of 13, Ulysses Ward came with his sister to Howell, Michigan. He helped to break up the land whereon Howell now stands, and his sister, Mrs. Rosalie Thompson, gave the land for the county seat, to which deed of sale our subject was called as a legal witness. Now this is where it gets interesting. This is where the pioneer stuff comes in, because this account says that Ulysses Ward was among the first Caucasians to settle in the Lansing area. And he actually built a structure here in 1842. He was 14 years old at the time. In 1842, he had a cousin come from New York to hunt and trap, and Ulysses took him west, overland to Cedar River, where Fowlerville now stands, and they came down with their boat to the junction of the Cedar and the Grand Rivers, and putting up a shanty, stayed here all winter on a place that is now within the city limits of Lansing. They did not see a white person all winter, and as far as is known, they are the first white men who lived for any length of time where Lansing now stands. The name of this cousin is Edwin Lamphere. In the spring, the young men went down the river to Portland and were pleased to come again within the limits of civilization and to find their bearings, as they had lost track of the day of the week and the day of the month. Now, this account is disputed. This is history, and there's a lot of hearsay here. I have an article about U.D. Ward from the Lansing State Journal that was written in the 50s or 60s. Now, according to this article, it says Ward's shanty may have been the place where Lansing Township was organized, although history is not clear on this. Chapman Brothers' History of Ingham and Livingston, which I just read here, states that Ward and a cousin, Edwin Lamphere, wintered here in 1842, although Durant's History of Ingham and Eaton records that a group of settlers met at the log shanty near the Cedar Bridge to organize Lansing Township, February 16, 1842. So it may have been someone else that set up that log cabin, but in any case, he was one of the earliest people to build here. And granted, he only spent the winter here, and then he went off to Howell and lived there until 1846, and then his father died. So as the mother was left with a family to take care of, and as Ulysses was one of the oldest of her flock, he dutifully returned to New York and went to work on the farm to help support the children. But he didn't stay there very long, because the following year, he went over to the Allegheny Mountains and was there employed in getting out timber. He was there for some 2 years, and then went to farming for the father of the young lady whom he afterward made his wife, and her name was Laura Jeanette Town, and they married in the year 1850. They lived on the same farm until 1856, when finally Mr. Ward sold that property and returned to Lansing, and he set up a shop as a butcher. And he remained in Lansing until 1861, when the Civil War broke out. He enlisted in Company B, 2nd United States Sharpshooters, and in November 1861, he joined the Army of the Potomac. His experiences were broad and varied as he took part in 72 engagements, which included all of the most prominent battles of the war, such as Gettysburg, the Wilderness, Antietam, and Spotsylvania. And he was also present at Lee's surrender and saw the white flag come in. He was on detached service all of the time with the wagon train, having charge of the quartermaster's department, and when his first term of service expired, he became a veteran. He was finally mustered out of service at Detroit, July 17, 1865. He returned to Lansing, sick, and was unable to labor for 2 years. And then he went into business as a contractor, making a specialty of moving buildings, and has been able to oversee his men most of the time since, but was not able to do any hard labor himself. He also moved and straightened smokestacks, and had unusual skill in this kind of work. He takes heavy contracts for the Lansing Iron Works in various parts of the state, and also engages in pressing and shipping hay and straw. And this brings us to 1881, actually no, 1882. They had the family reunion. Lots of relatives came over from New York, and also my great-grandparents came from New York to visit. And shortly thereafter, they came here to live, and the rest is history. But in 1885, Ulysses cleared the land himself for the home that he would build. And this house is on 306 Butler Street, and it was called Claypool Street back then. This is a contemporary drawing of the house from 1889, and this is the house the way it looked yesterday when I took a picture of it. Day before yesterday. And this is it's an Italianate home of variegated fieldstone, and Ulysses got these fieldstones by taking a wagon around the countryside and asking farmers for their loose stones, because these farmers just had these big huge boulders that they wanted to get rid of. And so he would ask the farmers for these stones, and he probably got these for free. So that's what the house is made of. It still stands there today, and it's the home of the Lansing Association of Women's Clubs. So he built that in 1885. And the account here says, the pleasant home which is now occupied by Mr. Ward's family at number 301 Claypool Street was built by him in 1885, and it is situated on land which he himself cleared from the original timber. So this brings us to up to the 1890s, when Ulysses Ward assisted in the construction of the First Baptist Church of Lansing. And Mr. Ward, since he was adept at building and moving buildings and that sort of thing, they put him on the building committee. These are pictures of the First Baptist Church under construction. Here you can see the tower that's going up. Here are the stonemasons working. Here's another picture of the stonemasons working on First Baptist Church. And about this time period, I have a very nice typed account from my great-grandfather, Ernest Herschel Ward. And Ernest Herschel writes, "This brings us up to the time when our church was planned and built. I was one who saw it under construction. In fact, I worked on the job. I carried drinking water to the stonemasons one summer vacation." Here are a few things that I remember. He wrote this in the 1950s, shortly before he died. "I heard church problems discussed, and knew by sight at least many of the devoted men and women whose courage and determination made this splendid building a reality. A boy of 12 is usually more concerned with marbles and baseball than the financial problems of a building committee. But in later years, when I learned and understood better the problems that this undertaking involved, my respect and admiration for certain men and women grew. Warren Sullivan, Mrs. Gardner's father, my uncle, U.D. Ward, Deacon Rourke, and probably others signed notes at the bank that a failure to pay could easily have lost them their homes. Acts like this require real courage and devotion." Plans for the building were drawn by two young men who later became well-known architects, Earl Mead and Ed Bowd. I was more impressed by Bowd's ability to ride a high-wheeled bicycle than his skill as an architect. And if you want to see one of those high-wheeled bicycles, there's one upstairs. They're very impressive. They're huge. As the work on the church progressed, it became more and more difficult to find money to pay the men. Mr. Fitzpatrick, as well as the building committee, became alarmed at the situation, and he was doubtless glad to have the building committee take the less than half-completed building over and proceed with a superintendent who was directly responsible to them. Superintendent Brundage was well qualified to run this kind of a job, and was on the job until the church was finished. Some of the stones were donated and delivered by farmers living near the city, but most of them were brought in on special wagons owned by my uncle, U.D. Ward, and used by him in his building moving business. These wagons had very low, heavy beds that only cleared the ground by a few inches. This made it easy to roll heavy stones on without having to lift them. At the time of the building of the church, stones were to be found on most farms. They had been taken off the land when it was cleared and placed in the lanes and field corners. There were plenty to choose from, and only the best were brought in. Even at that time, the conglomerate was a favorite, and you can see quite a number of them in the walls. My great-grandfather loved to talk about stones because he was a stone collector, and one of his hobbies was to collect and polish rare stones. So he goes on to say, conglomerate is composed in larger part of smaller stones. Those smaller stones are always quartz or members of the quartz family, and he took pains to write that in himself after he typed this. Jim DeWitt of Grand Ledge was considered to be about the best mason in or near Lansing, and Uncle Ulysses hired him for the church job. He was the man I liked to watch best, because he made a hard job look so easy. He knew just where and how to strike a stone to make it split. Jim did not seem to have any trade secrets, as he was always willing to show a younger man a better or easier way. My uncle had a large yard at the corner of Ionia and Butler Streets, and it was here that the stones were brought and rough work was done. Now, that lot stayed a vacant lot throughout the years, and now it's a work lot again. The city is using it for the construction. So it probably looks the same now as it did 100 years ago. Very dusty and nasty. Most of the stones were broken by a series of hard strikes with a heavy stone hammer. 8 and 12-pound heads seemed to be the ones used for this. Some of the larger stones were broken by cutting a groove in the stone where they wanted it split, and then building a fire on and around it. When the stone is sufficiently hot, a pail of water is thrown on. This usually will cause it to split with a sharp crack. The man who throws the water turns his back to the stone before the water strikes, as small pieces are liable to be thrown off with considerable force. After the stone was broken into a rectangular shape, it was ready to be delivered to the job, where another set of masons placed them in the walls. The mason had to cut many of the stones down to make it fit where he wanted to use it. The cornerstone was donated by my uncle, and I'll show you the cornerstone. First I'll show you the Baptist church. Okay, this is the Baptist church when it was finished in 1891. This is a contemporary drawing of it. And this is the Baptist church in about the 1950s, and it basically looks the same now as it did in the 50s. And really the only modifications that they did is they removed this staircase, because according to John Curry, who loaned me some photos, they were having all sorts of problems with water getting underneath the steps. So it wasn't that they wanted to make it look ugly, which is what I thought, but they were having terrible problems with keeping it out there, so I forgive them. Now here we have, this is what everybody thinks is the cornerstone, because it looks like a cornerstone and it's on the corner, but this is the actual cornerstone, and it's not on the corner and it doesn't have any marking on it. And here's what my grandfather had to say about the cornerstone. The cornerstone was donated by my uncle. It is just west of the front entrance. I believe it is the largest stone in the building and the only one with a beveled edge. There is no inscription on it. And they use the cornerstone as a time capsule, and they put all sorts of little church artifacts inside, and most of it's pretty boring stuff in my opinion. There's no buried treasure inside there, which is probably intentional, because then somebody might have broken into it. But they have inside there they have a box with an address to the finder written by the pastor, articles of faith and covenant, issues of the Baptist Visitor newsletter, cards in relation to the cornerstone, some coins by members of the choir. That's so people don't open it later. And I can show you where it is. Cornerstone is right here. for anyone who's curious. That's it's right here. It's just to the right of the entrance, and it's bigger than the rest. So that's what was donated by my great uncle. And they would carry all these stones from the lot down Ionia Street with horses and buggies. It's so neat. Okay, so here's where you get to the part about my family, because Ulysses Ward and his wife died toward the end of the century. Laura Ward died in 1897, and Ulysses died in 1903 of heart failure. And Ulysses actually continued to work moving smokestacks and buildings until very shortly before his death, and he lived to be about 76 years old. And my relatives, this is my great-uncle Clinton Ward, who was killed in the Spanish-American War. This is my Aunt Eva, and she married Frank Young, and I'm not sure when she died. And this is my great-grandfather, Ernest Herschel Ward, and 3 of his daughters are sitting in this room.
Wow. And who are they?
Could you raise your hands?
Wait, we have to get a shot of them. Thank you for coming.
So this is a photo of the family taken in New York when they were still living there in the early 1880s. And as you can see, they're very happy to be here. I love the expression on his face. He's like, why are they making me wear a dress? And this is a photo taken in the early 1890s. And here's Clinton again, and here's my great-grandfather, and here's my great-aunt Eva. And this is my great-great-grandmother, Rilla. She preferred to be called Rilla, although her real name was Aurelia. So you have to call her Rilla. And this is Herschel Ward, my great-great-grandfather. And I have letters from Uncle Clinton saying how he used to do odd jobs for Uncle UD. And he would move safes around and stuff. And sometimes great-grandpa Herschel would help as well. So Uncle Clinton has this wonderful story about moving a safe up a flight of stairs. And of course, Pa had to help. And so he stationed himself at the top of the stairs. And they worked all afternoon moving the safe up the stairs. And then they discovered that the space at the top of the stairs was so small that they could get the safe up, but they couldn't get Pa out. So, so they had to work for a few more hours to get the safe all the way in so that Pa could come down and have his lunch. But, so yeah, that was written in 1899, just the year before Uncle Clinton went off to the Philippines and was killed by friendly fire. So that's unfortunate. But Ernest Herschel Ward lived on. And he started the E.H. Ward Company in 1910, which is a sheet metal and heating and cooling company on Mount Hope Avenue. And that's still there. It's been there for almost 100 years. So he passed that on after he died in 1957. So I think that's pretty much it. Does anyone have any questions?
Did you ever find any references to the Turners in your stuff?
I don't find any references to the Turners, actually.
It's so fun to find out how if they knew each other. And
I really haven't done that much research.
Yeah.
Most of what I have came to me from Aunt Eva over here. So I have the benefit of a family that really values its history and values genealogy. So I really haven't had to spend that much time in libraries and looking for bits and pieces. And consequently, there may be some information because U.D. Ward came here with his wife in 1856. And Lansing was only 9 years old at the time. So he was still a pioneer even when he returned home.
Sure.
You know, he was really a pioneer in 1842 when he came here, living off the land and camping at the age of 14 and hunting and trapping. That's pretty amazing. And he joined the First Baptist Church in 1858 when it was still a little tiny white building. And then his family came here and joined him in the 1880s. And we've been here ever since. And a lot of us are still here.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you very, very much.